my Paraholic friends. I am Loida, the creator of loveacrylicpainting.com and enchantingfineart.com. Today I'm going to be doing some small seascape paintings, and I'm going to be using some of my GLAM Sands and GLAM Glitter powders. These are the colors, some of the colors that I offer in the GLAM Sands. The tan one is still not on the website yet. This is Fiji Glitter Glam Powder, and this one is called Heaven, which is also not on the website yet. I'm going to be putting these up on the website pretty soon. You can find them at the enchantingfineart.com website. Those were just some shells from Michael's and some round wooden panels from Hobby Lobby. And I'm going to be using a new resin from Epodex, which I absolutely love so far. These containers, measuring containers, are also from Epodex. The resin so far, I love it. It looks very crystalline clear. It dried really well, no issues at all. It's not as viscous as other resins that I've used, but I guess this could be called a pro because this will help with not creating so many bubbles. And it does have a very long working time. I would say it's about 60 minutes, so you have a very long time to work with your project. This resin is a little bit different than other resins. You do have to use 2 parts resin and 1 part hardener, so just keep that in mind. And I'm also going to be using some Colourarte materials that are not shown right now. I'm going to be using some Moonrocks and some Resin Art tints. I'll show those in just a little bit. The first step is to mix some of the GLAM glitter powder into a little bit of resin. So this one is the Fiji color, the Fiji GLAM glitter powder, and then later I'm going to be mixing some of the Heaven GLAM glitter powder, and I'm going to apply that mixture onto my round wooden panels. This is my Heaven GLAM glitter powder mixed with resin, and I'm going to do the same thing with this other wooden panel. And while my resin is still wet, here comes my Moonrocks, the Poseidon Grotto Moonrocks from Colourarte, and I'm going to be just tearing apart some pieces from these Moonrocks because they do come in bigger chunks. So they are super easy to cut because they are just mica flakes. And so just, tear off little pieces and just place them wherever you want. The second step is to add in your sand. Now, I did use 2 different methods for placing my sand. The first method was mixing my sand with the resin and then applying that mixture onto my wooden board. I didn't quite like that because it made my sand look really wet. So I prefer a sand that looks a little bit more dry. So later on you'll see that I sprinkle a little bit more of the sand right on top of that wet mixture so that it doesn't look so wet. Another thing to keep in mind is that maybe you might want to leave that first layer of glitter to dry before you add your sand area, just to make sure that you don't get any sand, particles into that glitter, into that wet layer of glitter. But it's up to you. In my case, I didn't let it dry, but I would see a benefit, in letting it dry before placing my sand, just to make sure that I don't get anything that I don't want to be stuck in that area. In this second method of placing my sand, I just added a very thin layer of resin. As you can see here, I'm just spreading it with my stick, and then I'm just sprinkling my black sand. And this is where I think, that leaving your first layer of glitter to dry would be beneficial, because I am sprinkling my sand and I could get, some of those particles stuck on my glitter area. So if you want to prevent that, let that first layer dry, and then come in and do your sand area. However, like I said, I didn't do that. And then here I'm just pressing it down a little bit with my fingers just to make sure that the sand gets stuck on that resin. For this black piece, I decided to add 2 pieces of seashells, but you know, if you're going to be using these as coasters, you probably don't want anything that will leave your surface bumpy. So I decided to leave one without seashells and one with the seashells. And I just glued them on with a little bit of resin. Now I'm going to do the waves. And again, I'm using my Epodex resin. And I'm using these small measuring cups because previously I did a very big batch and I had a ton left over, so I'm just going to make a small batch. Then I'm using this white Alumilite, I think that's the name, white pigment, and these Resin Art pigments from Colourarte. It's Caribbean Sea and Bahama Mama tints, and I'm going to be dissolving one of those tints in alcohol before pouring it into my resin, and that's just the instructions that Colourarte has on their websites, and I think it's to help your tint dissolve really well and just have a very clear tint with no specks. I mean a very clear resin with no specks. So I'm testing it out both ways. I'm going to dissolve one of the tints in alcohol, and the other tint will just be mixed into the resin directly. For the alcohol tint mix, you're supposed to just grab a little bit of the liquid that's on the top. So you need to prevent, you know, grabbing any of the sediment that falls on the bottom of the cup. And this is the other one where I'm just mixing the tint directly into the resin. And I did notice that it did have a few specks. So definitely just follow the Colourarte directions of, you know, mixing the tint into some alcohol. And as you saw previously, I used a very tiny amount of these tints, and these containers are really full, they're really big, so these tints will last you a very, very long time. They're worth your money. There's even a coupon code for 20% off on the screen, so take advantage of that and get yourself some tints if you're going to be trying to do some of these coasters. Now I'm adding some clear resin next to the sand area because that's where I'm going to be adding my waves. And I've heard some artists mention that it's easier to create lacing when you have clear resin in that area. So that's what I'm doing. And then I am going to color or add the tints or the tinted resin into the other areas of the ocean part. Now I'm adding a little bit of my white pigment into a little bit of resin so that I can make my waves. This is the first time that I've ever done a seascape with resin, so I didn't really know what to expect. It was kind of an experiment. I started blowing on it to see if that would help create the lacing, because I was just too lazy to get my heat gun. It was buried somewhere in my tools. But then I had to go get it, and I started, you know, giving it a try with the heat gun. That seemed to work a lot better. However, because I had added those Moonrocks, those were not completely covered in resin, so they were a little bit, you know, sticking out of the resin. So when I tried to blow the white resin over that area, in some areas it kind of got stuck and I wasn't able to create the waves that I wanted. which is fine. Like, I ended up liking how it turned out, but I was trying to get a little bit more lacing, and I couldn't because, you know, those Moonrocks were kind of in the way. I let these pieces cure, and then I went in the next day and added another wave. So I wanted to see if I could get more lacing now that my surface was a little bit more even, now that my Moonrocks were a little bit more covered, you know, in that other layer of resin. And I also added some more colored resin right on top. I didn't want to add too much color, too much tint into the resin, because I didn't want to cover the color of the glitter that I had added as the layer underneath. I wanted that glitter to just shine through, so I think for my next project I might just add a clear layer of resin right on top, or add very little amounts of tint, just so that I can preserve that original color of the glitter, because that glitter is just fabulous, and I don't want to hide any of that. But these pieces just turned out fabulous anyway, so you'll see in the end that you'll still see that sparkle coming through the ocean part, and they're just beautiful. Here you can see that that bottom part is a lighter, like a baby blue, and the top part is more green. That's where, you know, I added the tinted resin, and that lighter blue color, that's the true color of the glitter. So that's what I meant by, you know, maybe trying a different project with a clear layer of resin, just so that I can keep the true color of the glitter, and then just have that original color shine through the resin. All I'm doing here is just kind of blending that greenish bluish tinted resin into the clear resin that I added next to the sand area. I'm doing the same here, just so that it kind of transitions, you know, from green and gradually just kind of fades in. Then I added some of my white resin and proceeded to create more waves. This time around, I had decided to just wait a little bit longer so that the resin was a little bit more viscous before adding my wave in, and I thought I might be able to create more lacing that way, but I think that created less lacing. I mean, you kind of see some cells forming there, but then maybe it was just that I overworked it. So I wasn't very happy with the shape of the wave, so then I started like blowing more and more, and eventually I lost all of my cells, or most of my cells. But in the end, I still like, you know, the end results, so I'm happy with that. It's just that I didn't get the lacing, you know, that I was going for initially, but it's just because I just overworked my resin. I just blew on that white too much. I had to add more black sand because I just added too much white, and I covered most of my black sand, so I just added some sand in some areas where I had a lot of white. And yeah, I really like the end result.